Welcome. This is the January 9th bhyve production user call. We have Andrew, Hans, Jan, John, Jared, Alexander, and myself, Michael, and Happy New Year, everyone. We talked briefly before the call about the viability of SeaBIOS in bhyve. It's come up over and over for about a decade, and there is a FreeBSD SeaBIOS port for Zen, so perhaps someone can take a peek at that. Happy holidays. We've all been working on some little projects. I did some OccamBSD Imagine and Propagate, much of which you can see on, I believe, Tuesday's call. The recording's up. Have at it. But John, you spent some time with Netgraph. You found that you can't just drop a config in rc.conf like you can with other bits of FreeBSD networking. What is it you were trying to achieve, and where did you have to do that configuration? And you're muted. Perhaps by design. I don't know.
No, not by design, by accident.
Okay. No worries.
Just to follow on to some of the stuff I think I talked about prior to
Sure.
Christmas. I've been working on automating some NetGraph stuff, and I wanted to have the system come up with a default set of NetGraph points. And there's no, and like I said, a minute ago I said, first class citizen. Looking at the script, looking at what you just posted, or what one of the guys posted, this is very similar to a few other things I've found.
Hmm.
I mean, I get it. I can issue a package add on this, but it would be nice since NetGraph is a first class citizen within FreeBSD. It would be nice if the configuration of NetGraph was a first class citizen.
That's a great point. Uh,
It's kind of hard to do because Netgraph is such a flexible subsystem that it is a parallel universe of an alternate networking stack, which is a lot more flexible than the normal one, which
That doesn't mean
is,
you
yeah,
can't be a first class citizen.
no, but it means that unless you want the first class citizen to be, yeah, write your custom Netgraph scripts. It's really, what are you looking for? Are you looking for some kind of declarative specification language for that state? Yeah.
The same way I go in,
Because
I issue an if config, and I
Mhm,
if config underbar X commands in rc.conf, which are read in.
mhm,
The you know the the networks are configured. I can
mhm.
configure a bridge, but I cannot configure a NetGraph bridge.
Well, in GCTL,
No, not from rc.conf. Why can't
like
I issue some kind of a bridge on ngctl underbar bridge underbar something? There's got to be
exactly.
the dynamically configuring it everything from the ground up and having to figure this stuff out is, while
Mhm.
I get it on my part, I want to do something that I can hand off to other people to support.
Yep.
And again, it's not a first class citizen.
and it
But
shouldn't be a rite of passage.
but to you,
Welcome, Simon.
in my opinion, you can't reasonably support all that NetGraph can technically express in a flat config file, especially a static one. Um, so you would have to make it opinionated like ng-body, which says, okay, we are using netgraph for this use case, and the graph will look like this. This is basically the topology we support. And if you want to do something completely different, write your own script. And here lies, in my opinion, a problem because you have to bake policy into it. It's not easy to have a neutral mechanism and still be something you can throw at a junior sysadmin.
John, would rc.local count in which
No.
you just throw in some stuff and stand back and watch it go?
Um, Kind of already been there, done that.
Okay.
Um,
Does it ultimately behave the way you want? Did you achieve that goal yet you just want it to be streamlined and more out of the box?
So in the specific case that I'm looking at, I have one bridge which is attached to one interface, and then I have a couple of other bridges which are not attached to interfaces. They're local to the system, and they have taps coming off of them going off to various VMs that do various types of work. Um, and it's fine. And there's nothing that this is basically a conversion of an existing bridging interface, and there's no reason why this couldn't be done in rc.conf if we had the appropriate if it was treated as I say as if it was treated as a first class citizen. Um,
That said, given that there's a ridiculous, almost harmful amount of bridge and tap information out there, I do see how a simple conversion or realignment of one to the other and nothing more is actually a nice, tangible, good starting place. Just saying.
sure. I mean, one of the things we're looking at is, NG is faster, has a lower latency. So what would it take to convert a bunch of systems that are currently using the existing bridging interface over to NG?
Okay.
Um,
Did you see Jan's question? Are you using IF bridge or NG bridge?
Implicitly answered.
Oh, thank you.
yes.
Okay. Yes.
This is
Okay.
pretty interesting to me because I read all about Netgraph. I saw some slides and I read about how to do it, and I was like, well, this looks pretty interesting. It looks more flexible than I strictly need. I don't like maybe if I were scaling things way up, I would want this, but it looks like it's not that simple to make it happen at boot time for me and my like 5 VLANs and my firewalls that I want and stuff like this. And so I ended up doing it with IF Bridge, I suppose, not with
Yes.
Netgraph. And I had some fun learning in which order bridges and VLAN interfaces and things like that come up. Um, and that wasn't under any production pressure. Um, neither to get it done within a certain amount of time, nor to be a certain amount of simple. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Or communicate it to a team of other sysadmins who do not have your experience or insights, perhaps.
right. Well,
Well,
I did. I was a little bit concerned with like my future self, a year from now, having forgotten everything and trying to sleuth it all out again. Um, but yeah, this discussion is relevant to my interests.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a sec. Simon, do you have any topics or are you a fly on the wall, which is a perfectly legit form of engagement on these calls? So yeah, as I screamed by, I've done some OccamBSD, Imagine, and Propagate work and got the attention of Jared. Welcome, Jared, and we'll get to the exact details of that. But would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Jared Jennings. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Um, I work information security for a utility company. Um, and I run FreeBSD at home. I have um, a single, fairly large PC, 64 gigs of RAM. I don't know, 4 TB ZFS mirror, storing all of my photos in my home directory going back to 1999. Um, so I'm not using FreeBSD at work, but I am using it a lot at home. And I got it into my head that I should replace my OpenWRT router with a redundant pair of routers. And I did have a chance to use OpenSense briefly here at work, and it was really cool. But I wanted to do something less graphical and smaller and try to use jails instead of VMs. And those were all just sort of personal challenges that I set for myself. If I were really going to do it in a repeatable way, I would use OpenSense, I suppose. But that's what got me onto trying to make repeatable jails, because I'd made one of this jail and one of that jail, but now suddenly I want two jails that are exactly the same on different machines, except for the things that need to be different about them. And I wanted them to be small because I have a tiny, like 512 megabyte RAM cloud instance that I'm running. And so, if I can make things tiny, then I want to,
Okay.
because it's cheaper.
Jan shared a breakthrough yesterday of a project he's been working on to use nested nifty ZFS datasets, clones, and PkgBase to create almost instantaneous tiny jails. So check out the recording from yesterday. It's been months in the making. You can follow the history up to it, but he shared his breakthrough, and I'm hopefully accurately speaking for you, Jan. You've come to the right place, although the Tuesday jail call is more on focus, but it segues into OpenZFS on Wednesdays, and then, of course, jailed bhyve on OpenZFS, which is all the things. So here we are, even on Illumos, because we have two Illumos people. We have Andrew Hedinger and Hans Rosenfeld, who are Illumos users and developers who put us to shame with things like crossbow networking, and they're probably laughing quietly to themselves about Netgraph. I'm like, come on, guys, join the future. But anyhow, you've come to the right place, and thank you for the intro. And so I don't have a pretty picture right in front of me, but Jared looked at PkgBase and blasted out an awk file to put the dependency tree into GraphViz. And that was quite cool. I posted some ridiculously crude images on the Fediverse the moment I got it working, because I've never spent time with GraphViz. But if you have a generated image handy or a zoom in, maybe drop it straight in the doc or something, or I can possibly drop in a picture of it. But I think as now folks like Jan and I get a basic grasp on PkgBase, we've definitely had questions like, why the heck is ZFS being brought into my jail, and where I definitely didn't even request a kernel, let alone. So Jan, did you have a chance to peek at his topics discussed on the Fediverse?
So I haven't followed your thread. I've seen your initial post. I haven't seen the responses.
Okay.
By the way, Netgraph easily exposes the system state via a GraphViz file, and GCTL has a built-in subcommand to emit a GraphViz dot file for the network configuration of your FreeBSD system.
Hey,
yes, exactly.
So that's what they're using. Oh, yes, I've seen those graphs, but wasn't sure that that's the same plumbing. Cool.
Yep. Of course, only the Netgraph visible internal state, not the normal network stack configuration, but you could write something similar-ish. But yeah, GraphViz and Netgraph are a good fit, because Netgraph, as the name hints at, is a graph representation of the internal network of a FreeBSD system. So it can be plotted as a graph.
Yeah, I think no, I don't remember.
I'll try to find.
I might have played around with that exact thing.
I have, but it's at least 5 years ago, probably longer.
Another use case that already exists that I wrote down is if you run sysctl kern.geom.confdot, you will get a GraphViz formatted graph of your geom.
Drop that in the chat, please.
Stuff.
No way, you're kidding. Okay, these are coming together beautifully in an instant. Okay, drop it in the chat. I want to see that syntax and get it right. That is cool. Let's
Uh,
see. Syscontrol. Okay.
Syscontrol,
And while you do that, what is the GraphViz license
Geom.
purely out of curiosity? I know nothing.
Um, I don't remember. I
Okay.
know that it's at graphviz.org. I know they came
Out.
out of AT&T
Okay.
originally in the 90s at some point.
Hmm. Oop, there
Um,
we go. Beautiful.
and,
Jan came up with three possibilities. Go ahead and watch the main display, and maybe
There are
it's
different formats. The kernel can export a text file, a dot graph, and an XML
huh.
encoding. So, of course, the kernel does not parse XML, it only emits
mhm.
hopefully valid XML.
Cool.
Looks like
Sure.
GraphViz
Go
is
ahead.
under the Eclipse Public License 1.0.
Interesting. Okay. Show of hands, even though you don't have to show hands. Is anyone else using GraphViz for other stuff? Be it Andrew, Alexander, John? Is there some tribal wisdom within reach that might benefit the fact that we can now graph Netgraph, Geom, package-based dependencies?
Other than playing around with it with NG, no, that's all I've
Okay.
done.
Well, that's a great start. That's awesome. Cool.
So,
So there is a pull request
let's
or
see.
a issue that you've issued, Jared, that has simply the awk file, and I'll post a link to that for those who want to just try it for package base. I guess outside of Occam BSD, I assume it will do that. Let me pull that up. Go ahead. You were saying something.
Yeah, so I wrote a little trivial dot file in the bhyve production user call document that's linked from the calendar entry.
Okay.
Um, so I didn't realize that that's a different one from the one that you make here
The most
on the
up-to-date
screen.
one should be here as there's the previous quarterly ones and then the live current one. Is that not what you're bumping into? Let's see.
Hmm, I don't know.
Okay,
It's kind
so
of a
The
long.
different
I was
calls
going to type
have
the URL,
their
but it's
own.
a.
Sorry.
Sorry,
here's
go
that
ahead.
pull request where you will find the awk that Jared kindly blasted out for the graphing. Anyway, drop what URL you have in the chat. Maybe we're on the same page, maybe we're not. We'll sort it out.
Hmm.
Files changed, so bless your heart on this. And by the way, you are welcome to throw the same template copyright and license at the top, and then maybe I'll handle the op-args and you just handle your own independent file because it's nice and separate if it's in a totally different language and it's a work of art. So yeah, here's his work. Thank you for that. Yay. I'll leave it at that.
Let's see. Yeah. So the way that I actually pull requested it. There's the URL. Okay.
Ooh.
The way that I actually pull requested it, sort of takes a left turn towards being part of propagate.sh at the
Hmm.
last moment, um, because I needed the exact package command that you're using with like there's like 4 or 5 long options that you're passing it,
Mhm.
and the whole base package exclusions regular expression. So I didn't end up like doing any decent option parsing in awk. I just expect 6 lines of input in this one weird tiny format.
Mhm.
So that can be changed. And the graph that it emits, I mean, the great thing about graph is you basically just say digraph G curly brace A arrow B B arrow C and curly brace. So it's really easy to emit, even from the kernel. So and it's up to Graphviz to figure out where to draw the nodes. So if the positions of the nodes matter a lot, then Graphviz is not the easiest tool. But if it's their relationships, the edges between them that matter, then it can save a lot of time. And I love dependency graphs. I've been making them with Graphviz for a long time.
What other
And,
components have you been graphing?
um, well, the first one that I really dug was I wrote this giant Puppet policy in like the early 2000s that had about 500 Puppet classes.
Okay.
Um, and I graphed all the dependencies between them. I had to do a little bit of Puppet language parsing to derive those dependencies, but then it was easy to emit them in a graph. And the graph was so big that when I printed it out on paper, uh, the text of the nodes was too small to read.
Yep.
But
I
it was
noticed.
really pretty. I had all kinds of colors and things.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I've had a lot of fun with Graphviz, and it's made a lot of things clear to me. Um, the particular thing that it shows right now, which is the set of packages that you have selected by
Mhm.
excluding the rest, and the surprising dependencies, that is, dependencies of packages you selected on packages that you tried to exclude. Um, those are a special case of uh, generally relationships that you might want to know between base packages.
Mhm.
Um, so I tried to kind of make the awk script hackable so that if you need to see something different, it's easy to see where to change it. Um, although it sounds like the current thing that it draws is pretty well aligned with what needs to be shown right now.
Cool. I'm giving some snippet examples here. Very cool. Very cool. Jan, what would our query %dn do for our awesome listeners?
The list, that's one of the multi-line values you can query for. It is the dependencies by name per package,
Okay. The N for
which
name and D for dependencies, I'm guessing.
no, yeah, exactly, dependency first, and then give
Yeah.
me like for each package I'm querying, give me the dependency by name. And you could also get the by version or by origin, I think.
Yeah, so that's something worth mentioning. I didn't see any direct dependencies between packages. All of the ways that I saw that they pull each other in is
Yeah.
that package A uses shared library libb.so, and package X provides shared library libb.so.
Um, there's a query to at least query for the libraries and directories and files and so on. But I don't know if you can do that with a remote query or if a package has to be installed for that.
No, you can. It's %little b and %big B. I don't remember which is provides and which is requires, but that shows the shared library requirements and provisions for each package. Yeah, that in the chat.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, what you got? Here we go. Thank
So
you.
that's how well, originally I was graphing like all of the packages, all of the shared libraries, and all of the provision and requirement dependencies, and that was way too messy. Um, so what I ended up with was just following those, but not emitting edges or nodes about them. And so all that shows in the graph is packages and dependencies that I've derived by following that shared library chain.
But do you actually need the transitive file of the dependencies for the graph? Doesn't GraphViz implicitly do that during visualization? Because it's just part of the subgraph then?
Well, I mean,
Why would you flatten that?
I didn't want to visualize the shared libraries themselves, because when I did, the graph
Yeah,
was too big and confusing.
exactly. You're not going to get anything which is still visually meaningful to a human.
Right. And not only that, but I also found that like everything depends on the CLibs, which I
Exactly.
mean, that's unsurprising, right? So
If
I also kept that out of the graph, and that's what makes it
if
as easily viewable as it is.
if you
And
look at
oh golly,
FreeBSD 15, uh, libsys is probably the library to perform system calls is probably at the center of the graph instead of libc, because even libc depends on that.
mm,
Basically, to help fancy new languages like Rust, Go, and so on, FreeBSD 15 is going to have a dedicated library to perform just the system calls without any C trappings.
Really?
Uh, but it is a stable, versionable API. So you get I think it's got libsys.
cool. In other news,
Yes. What you got? Keep it coming.
I have to drop because
Oh,
I'm
geez.
late for
Okay.
another meeting.
Okay. Well,
But
awesome. That was
thanks
a heck
everyone
of
for your
a
attention.
debut. Welcome. You know where to find us. Keep your get your jail call questions ready for the jail call. Get your ZFS questions ready for ZFS, and here we are. That is great. Thank you. I think we will have some nice things this year, and that was a very pleasant surprise to have that code shoot out in a in your pull request. So anyway, we can discuss that further. Have a great meeting. Thanks for dropping in. And I
Thank you.
will make a
Bye,
note
everyone.
of, take care. Libsys.so, you say that is a C independent syscall contraption?
It's a library to perform system calls, and
Okay.
only that, without the rest of libc. It's only basically, okay, call this function and it does a system call. So doing, and yeah, but you're not pulling in libc if that is something you don't want.
Interesting. Okay.
And you also don't have to directly perform system calls uh, from within your language, which means things like symbol versioning and so on can still help you maintain compatibility.
Hmm.
The header is basically just, yeah, syscall number, and then the C is so that you don't pull in all of his C stuff you don't want.
Hmm.
And then you have the underscore libsys.h header, and it defines just the C structs you need to marshal the arguments and the call signatures for all the system calls. But no libc dependency. It pulls in a few headers, but those are just for types. And so that you basically only have to hook it into your foreign function interface, and you can perform all the syscalls,
Okay. Cool.
which should really help things like Rust and Go, and potentially other languages which don't want libc in their processes by default.
Cool. Alexander, I understand you might be having microphone trouble and you will have to go with interpretive dance to give us an update on updating the bhyve manual page. Possibly.
Let's see. So my laptop died. Let me try
There you
switching back
go.
to my laptop.
Oh, you sound great, but okay, fine. And phones are your friend in some of this, and I will post a handy tool for graphing. Here we go. There is the largest
May
plotter I could find for all those nifty graphs everyone's working on.
maybe I'll just um join and stay in this call that way on my phone. That way I can share it.
Oh, I see.
So I'm
Okay, sure.
appearing
Yep, great.
twice now.
Do what you got to do, and that's just fine. Many have done it before you.
So
No
one of
Zoom
the
shaming
horror
here.
stories with plotters, like the one you just dropped into the minutes,
Yes.
and those of the old-fashioned desktop publishing nerd who wrote a custom postscript by hand to compute a Mandelbrot fractal
Okay.
in the
Yep.
rasterizer and send that to a fancy new plotter. Turns out a laser plotter doesn't like it when the postscript emits a few pixels and then computes a few minutes, and the whole print job takes hours to days.
Hmm.
After a few days of constant cycling, the printer drum just gave out.
Did you intentionally say laser plotter or was that a slip? I have
No,
not
that
dealt with
was a laser
plotters in
plotter.
decades. That's a thing? Oh, really? Okay, I haven't touched them in
Yeah, that is a
decades.
thing,
Okay.
and it
Sweet.
as in a laser printer, but the size of a plotter.
No kidding. Okay, love it. I want one. So Alexander, you are sharing your screen and maybe you even have audio. What you
Only
got?
until you have to pay maintenance.
Oh, I can imagine.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so lately there's been a lot of development in bhyve, and we're getting a lot of new features, and they seem kind of subtle, but they're really changing what you can do with bhyve and also the workflow that I think you would want to use setting this up. So um, I'm very much a hobbyist user of bhyve. I don't have nearly all of the things that I've been tinkering with, even working, not in terms of development, but in terms of like literally just using it and trying to figure out how it works so I can fix the man page. But here we've got this, which is most of the same. I just added some stuff to the second paragraph. And I would like in the description section to say actually have kind of okay, so bhyve is a hypervisor, etc., right? But I would like it to also say like this command, like maybe I'm not entirely sure. Is bhyve for the hypervisor, and this is a command that's used to manage it, and to start it, and then we would put that in there, I think, and that would really help because I don't want to do all the handbook work and everybody's blog posts and make YouTube videos. Like I think if a manual on a thing can describe everything if we write it the right way. So I haven't touched most of these, but I've been tweaking around with the -L flag and the -S flag. I think that it's kind of confusing if you just read this document and don't have examples. Of course, there are examples in this document, but you have to use -S to specify that there's a LPC, and then you configure it with -L. So I want to work that in there somehow. And I've added this little link to virtual devices down here, and then because before it said emulated, and I don't know if we need to use that language because in the underlying logic it looks like that, and so we need to have those search terms. But I think that it seems more logical, like that's a stupid bike shed, but maybe all together, like the little stupid bike sheds, when it's all together in something polished, makes sense. It doesn't really make sense on its own. So this is still a very rough document, but I had wrote in before this same section, this virtual devices section, in the LPC section a similar way, but then I took it out because I wasn't too sure. This is still very early, but I added some more options in here and I alphabetized these options. And I would like to see if we can alphabetize the output of the help command as well, because it was alphabetized at first and then people added new features later and just
Yep.
tacked them onto the bottom.
Good eye.
So then also Yeah, that's
Nice.
that's
Oh,
about where we're at. Um, I haven't figured out how to say like, okay, so with ARM you don't use LPC. You specify these boot ROM under option O, and then from talking to people on the FreeBSD community Discord, I've determined that there's a number of different ways that you can specify some things that all have unique caveats, and I'm like trying to factor that in my head, but like you can get a console with specifying that on LPC, you can specify it on -S UART, and then you can
yeah.
also specify FBUF and all this stuff. And so there's a lot of different ways to do these things that I think need this to be refactored. So
So,
of course, we need a lot of community consensus to do this, and I also don't really know anything. So
Yeah.
I need that too.
Yeah, but your fresh eyes are invaluable because a lot of us just have watched it grow, and I'm discovering things as I read this. Chris M. Joined Tuesday, but he has very much been working on the documentation. So it would be great perhaps to have a little dedicated uh, to-do list hackathon just to determine where we're at. And I'm making a list of bullet points based on what you've said because they're all totally correct. I mean,
so
this has been such an evolution that here we are. So go ahead, Jan.
kind the frame buffer does something completely different than the UART or the virtual COM ports, and that one is a video frame buffer and then a VNC server to access that, and the other is just a serial port which you happen to use as your system console, so a lot easier. And yeah,
Yep.
then you have COM ports, which are often supported by things like firmware. For example, the UEFI boot ROM. And by course, those are basically the four traditional serial ports PC used to have going back to the Stone Age. Um, so these work just out of the box, whereas the virt.io console interface requires a power virtualized driver, which not every operating system has loaded by default and often doesn't have it hooked up as the system console by default. So yeah, these
So I'm
two
hoping that
console
you can
drivers
help
are
me.
quite similar, but they do not emulate the same kind of device. Basically, they're like different types
Okay.
of Ethernet cards. Like you have an Intel NIC and you have a Mellanox NIC. There's both do Ethernet, but you need a dedicated driver for one. And just because you have a driver for one doesn't mean you have a driver for the other.
Okay,
Yeah.
Alexander, you had a question point. And John, if you're still with us, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the manual page has been helpful or harmful for all of your device pass through, because I'm sure, Alexander, you might not have gotten to that point yet, because that's a pretty crazy advanced feature that's seen some churn lately. Go ahead. And Alexander, welcome, Cretonian. Alexander, it sounds like you have a response to Jan or
Oh,
question.
yeah, I'm hoping that you can help me because you
Yeah, totally.
know stuff. And someone in the Discord gave me a link to a script that they made that they had passed through working on Windows 10. And I've been reading that. And also from reading that, I discovered this guy was using some configuration syntax that was not documented in here. But I just got that today. And uh, I think really slowly. So
Okay.
the last thing I wanted to mention was just that, like, where we have to refer to the wiki page, this makes me so sad.
Ah,
The wiki page refer to this page,
yeah.
and I'm hoping that that we can do that. You know, I don't know how to put if it's appropriate to have a guest operating system section, but I was thinking at the very least, when I get a working Windows 11 configuration that I can describe simply, that'll be in the examples and mention that. And yeah,
Um, Yes, operating systems are not provided by FreeBSD, so I think they kind of might not belong in the base OS, but of course they're important. So maybe gentle touches on what resources we can provide for use with other OSs. But yeah, I don't want to dive into a React OS or something deep dive in the
Yeah,
manual.
then
But yes, that
examples
definitely has to be
directory.
covered. Maybe examples indeed. And I totally forgot that I spent a few hours fighting with GPU pass-through per Corvin's code with both 14 and 15. I still cannot get that to work for the life of me, despite having his firmware and flags and you name it. So there's that.
I watched this video, but I haven't got it working either.
No, yeah, yeah. Let me guess. Did you in Windows? Do you get the error 43 where it's like, oh yeah, device not happy?
I couldn't even get that far.
Okay.
My bhyve was like not accepting that to start up. And another thing I found that I want to put in here is that if it's not specified um, a COM port for
Hmm.
some reason, it won't it won't take it. It gives this firmware error. So I started putting that in a diagnostic section. This is not acceptable at all. This is just a draft, just so I can get it
Oh wait.
there, so I know to write on about it. But I kept getting this VM openf, and then I
That's
found
a new
that in
one.
the source code, and it had
Okay.
a great comment. Thank God, because I can't
Yeah.
read source code. But that's what I've got so far.
Okay. I'll put that on a list somewhere. Maybe not there, but yeah, that yeah.
It's worth
Go
noting,
ahead,
Mike.
John. Yes.
I his diagnostics is conceptually it's interesting to me. I have a number of just personal patches floating around
Hmm.
where in the bhyve code the they use the same error in multiple different places.
Yes, they do.
And and when I've been bitten by this, so I've gone in and modified the source to say, okay, this is the first location where this is happening, this is the second location, third location, so that I can try to actually figure out where the error is truly happening and what it means. But this is the developer programmer versus the user
Yep.
discussion. Make the error message usable. Um,
John, based on what you saw, could those numbers simply be incremented and documented and say, okay, new error number 163 is this condition? Or are they
um,
internally ambiguous?
so I think maybe you asked me a different question,
Maybe.
and
Interpret it as you please.
well, history. I'm an old mainframe programmer, and I come off the mainframe where we have return codes that I can encode many different values into this nice big hex value.
Okay.
But yeah, I would love to see some form of error one, error two, error three, error four, with a return code of one, with the standard error containing a digit and a number that would allow us to have a very concise mapping of error to what's wrong. But that's a long term goal. Rarely happens.
Mm. Keeping those stable, because that is the long-term pain with that. Because to get to the quality mainframe users expect, you kind of have to remain not just compatible with the intended behavior, but with all the bugs and errors you can trigger. Because the moment you promise someone a stable numeric identifier for an error condition, that error condition number has to now be part of a stable interface.
The error
And
code,
that
at least on the old mainframe, the error code can contain a module, a line
mhm.
offset. It contains all kinds of information that is highly useful that we don't,
The-
but we don't. I've not seen it in the Unix world personally.
what I've seen in the Unix world, and which as someone with more of a developer mindset is almost as good, especially for open source stuff where I can just look at the source code, is to get basically some version number of the executable so that I know which source code to check out, and then file and line number. in the error message, or that I can quickly find the place in the code.
Yeah.
Instead, what I really detest are things like you find in old Unix code where even the error messages are split across multiple strings so that the line doesn't get too long and so that you can't even take the full error message to grab for the obvious
I
fixed
don't mean to be
string
picky.
literals because
bhyve is full of that.
you have one string, new line, and then the other string, and it just exploits that C implicitly concatenates string literals, but that breaks
I
grep.
I would love to see the style guide updated that error conditions have to be a single line regardless of how long. But that's a personal comment.
I really love when things error one as a user.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when things error one, and in the MDoc manual language, we have a standard section for syntax for errors, and each of those errors can accept a list child underneath it, right? So even though it's a bit convoluted, I've seen a lot of things that are a bit convoluted, but the way they're described is so well structured that it makes it seem not so bad. And I think that that can absolutely be done here. That's maybe ambitious, and maybe it will take me a long time to do it by myself. But you guys are making amazing resources like this where we can just learn everything. Um,
It's a journey.
so yeah, I think that it gives error messages. If the error messages are used for a variety of things, we can still make a list with that, and that can still be described very nicely, actually.
Six sysexits.h. Okay. Cool. That is not an ocean we will boil today, but let's set some goals for 2025 for bhyve specifically. So yes,
bhyve is a
what's
special
actionable?
case.
Yes.
What I meant is,
How is
Sorry?
it a special case, Jan? Go for it.
so bhyve is a special case in
Welcome,
that
Mark.
once it is running, it doesn't do a lot of things mentioned there. So the runtime error conditions are very simple, and the exit codes are already defined to kind of tell the parent process through the exit code if bhyve voluntarily exited, if it wants to be restarted, and so on, if the VMM device should be destroyed. But coming back to your question like 10 minutes ago, is bhyve the command and thereby the process the hypervisor or something else? I would argue that bhyve is the hypervisor. VMM is the virtual machine monitor, which the hypervisor needs to efficiently virtualize because it is its interface to the hardware needed to perform efficient CPU virtualization. But all of this device emulation we've been talking about the last few minutes is all done in the bhyve user space command.
Okay, so we've got a bhyve.ko and a vmm.ko.
No, we don't have a bhyve.ko on FreeBSD.
What? We have a bhyve kernel module manual in section 4.
Is it misnamed?
It must be. Well, I mean,
Okay.
no, the fact that we don't have a bhyve.ko means that it is misnamed.
Yeah, okay.
We don't
because
have a
it's a 4.
bhyve.ko.
I see.
We have a vmm.ko.
So
Shoot a link.
there's a man for VMM, and that sounds like exactly what you're saying, describes it exactly what I would think.
Okay.
But then we also have a man for bhyve, and now that's the deal, I'm seeing that we should not have that, and this information should definitely be refactored into the other two manuals.
Yes and no. Looking at that man page, it looks like it's supposed to be the glue to reference to the right places, because historically when bhyve was implemented, it did not contain any BIOS or other boot from emulation. Instead, it required bhyve load, a port of the then FreeBSD bootloader into a user space command where basically on the host system you run bhyve load, which is the bootloader, but the bootloader doesn't configure the real system it's running on because it couldn't from user space, but instead it changes the state of the VMM device. And once it has said, I need this many CPUs, I need this much memory, then it reads in through just the host operating system, the kernel, and writes it to the guest memory, and then it exits, and the old bhyve user space command at the time only started execution from the already loaded kernel. So you had an external bootloader that is easier to get up and running because you don't have to be compatible with all the legacy crap PCs have accumulated.
Yep. Okay,
But
let's
it
keep
also
it
means
on
that
the
some things
docs.
are harder to do, especially when you want to boot something other than FreeBSD, which gave us
Yeah.
grub bhyve, which was a port of grub to do the same thing bhyve load does, just with all the attack surface of grub, which of course trusts the disks because it's only a bootloader until it isn't. And now all of this is history, and you normally just don't use bhyve load at all. You just run bhyve with a boot ROM, and then the UEFI firmware or the kind of deprecated BIOS firmware will boot the virtual machine directly from inside the hypervisor without going through an external bootloader first. And this leftover bhyve 4 main page you're rightfully criticizing
With the note that it's still
tells you
considered experimental.
that there are 3 commands related to bhyve and the kernel module, and that these 4 things belong together. But putting them just by path into the synopsis is probably not what you're supposed to do. Yeah, it would be interesting to go back in history to see how that man page has changed, if any. Just go to FreeBSD 10 or 11 and see if anything changed.
The synopsis, well, if you scroll down, Michael,
and it does say bhyve control
a,
instead of VMM-CTF, so there's that. Go ahead.
There's a okay, so this document was last touched in 2013.
Yep.
So, yeah, so I'm now thinking that we should put this in section 7 because it's a topic overview page. It's not, a kernel interface. Like there is the kernel interface as part of this topic called VMM, and that has its own manual page and it looks very nice. And I actually do like the synopsis, the way that this is. Lately, we've been doing something different with synopsises, but I think, like, to me, the most understandable type of synopsis for this sort of thing is the one for the virtual terminal in FreeBSD. At the top, it has all of the options that can be selected for compiling it in the kern.conf, and it has the actual device that you need to specify to put it in the kern.conf, and then it's got so it's vt.4. Sorry,
I did it apropos still. Okay, yeah, no, VT, let's do it.
So, like, to me, this is just the pinnacle of a synopsis. Like, I look at that and it's like as tersely as possible, everything you need to know. And lately, the grandmasters have decided that we need to do like explain to people that you don't have to compile it in. And so the synopsis is being another text chapter, and I really, really don't like that.
Yeah, that is, especially when you're coming back and you know what VT does, and you just need, okay, which is the loader tunable I have to change?
That is the point of a synopsis. The synopsis
Yes,
does not
exactly.
explain how to use it. It's like you glance and there's all the options, and that's the way it's been since my parents were born. That's the way it should be.
Cool.
because it
And we
works.
shouldn't try to front load the man page if you don't know to scroll down to the description. So we learn.
Okay, let's not do a full-on hackathon right now on docs, but Mark L, I would love to know if you have any thoughts on what was it, the balance of all this documentation to save a whole bunch of unnecessary bug reports and exit code handling, because that we're lacking on, and I want to maybe even throw in there like runtime bhyve information, because a VM might be a very long process. Go ahead, anyone, any takers?
I just woke up, so
Cool. No worries.
I'm not not really in a good position to answer
No
questions.
worries at all. Well, welcome. Feel free to use us as your morning coffee. Runtime bhyve reporting slash error handling. I mean, what's that even mean? That once the VM is running, how do we learn from it about what it's enjoying or not enjoying, and how do we graph it, et cetera, et cetera. So wow, we've covered a lot of ground. Crichtonian, you rolled in a minute ago. Do you have any topics? Does any of this grab your attention? Happy New
No,
Year.
sir.
Okay.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank
Glad to
you.
be on here.
So Daniel couldn't roll in, but I will present your question, John, to him about how do we have a really short, obvious path from Tappan Bridge to Netgraph, no more, no less. I think that would be super helpful. Drop in, no journey instead, as we've been having. Andrew, Hans, anything from your desks?
Not at the moment.
Cool. And I love the trifecta of graph vizzing you've brought up today, because if more than one tool is graphable, that sort of justifies someone looking at their whole stack and thinking, oh, I am either this close or this far from graphing more. And then getting that massive printer the size of my 4x8 foot desk. So we are at a few minutes into an hour. Anything else at this time, or shall we digest what's taken place and move on to next week? It's your call, not mine. And welcome. Jared had to take off, but I'm so glad he made it. It was such a pleasant surprise that he's like, oh yeah, by the way, here's a bolt-on independent graphing contraption for propagate and package-based dependencies. The link is in doc. It is 1909 UTC. I'm not hearing much feedback. What you got? It's been a great call. I love this.
I can't wait to rewatch it. I'm excited. Are you guys talking about like using Netgraph as a what's it called? A connection, like a TCP connection or something like that?
A higher performance
So,
bridge than the very basic one built into FreeBSD, and OpenBSD has recently rewritten their bridge, and we should rightfully be jealous.
okay. And the bridge now uses what's it called? A Netgraph instead of like an e-pairs, or I think bhyve like the tap interface, or what? Well, you can attach a network, I guess, to or an IP address to bhyve virtual machine, right?
So
An IP.
Daniel,
bhyve-
welcome. Hold on. Are you
Okay.
free to talk? Because the expert I kindly reached out to has shown up. So, hello.
Hey.
Hey. I will catch you up before we answer Crichtonian's question, which is John has been tinkering with Netgraph, and we broadly concluded, or I selfishly concluded, that it'd be great to have a super short path to having an rc.conf based replacement for bridge and tap networking with Netgraph. So that's a super simple drop-in replacement that one can say, hey, rc.conf if underscore thing, and have Netgraph in place of bridge and tap. Is that based on what you've seen in the wild? Is there a short path to that?
Yeah, have you heard of the thing called Netgraph, buddy? It does
That
exactly
came right up. Yes, bingo. But it still seems a bit external, if I'm not mistaken.
what do you mean? It's an
Uh,
RC con.
it
It's an
is.
RC.
Okay,
Yeah.
John, let's scroll up to Netgraph Buddy here. Maybe we have the missing link and we've had it, and we are simply confirming that with the author.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm referring to the concept of a first class citizen. I don't have to install anything to use the IF bridging. But for NG bridge, I do. It's not a first class citizen.
So rephrased,
So
Daniel,
it's
do you
not in
think this could
base.
be in base?
In base, that's right. So, but
Could it be,
what
to
if
your
we?
knowledge?
Well, I think what we would want to do is get Devin Teskey involved, who wrote the awesome jail scripts and knows more about NetGraph than I do, because I was solving the bridging jail VM problem, but I don't know if I've written code in there that excludes its use from other NetGraphy things. So I would want to get another brain on it before trying to push that into base. I'm absolutely not opposed. I think it could probably be tuned up and trimmed down a little bit, but I think a couple of code reviews, we could really make that happen in a month. But I would want another brain on it, because I did kind of pull it out of my butt, and I didn't collaborate with anybody. So it's never been edited by another person, and so on. And I did write it for me, even if it does scale quite well. But yeah, I think the approach works. The approach I took is agnostic and could work with all kinds of jails and VM managers. So I think a tool like that would be useful in base.
Okay, well, there's some support, and this really doesn't want to give me my list. There it goes. Who else beyond Devin do you think would need to be part of that conversation?
Um, well, okay, so I guess anybody who deals with RC order, because that's the other thing, is making sure that netgraph is initialized. And I sort of had to guess at my RC order. It does work with, so your jails and VMs will boot up. But I don't know if it's too early. I know if you have like bind has to start. If you have local bind server, it has to start after netgraph initializes. So there's some tricky spots and race conditions to deal with. So an RC brain might be helpful as well. Sorry about the street noise.
Yeah, your audio is awful, but your topic is brilliant. So thank you for that. We forgive.
So
Okay, yes,
if
Jan.
you're willing to re-architect it to that degree, it may be another idea to just emit rc.d script and then have it reload, so that rc.d has the option to kind of tell it, here's a new directory containing rc.d scripts, now rescan and run rc order again, so that you can kind of deal with dynamic stuff. At least I've seen code which indicates to me that this is intended to work. I don't know of an example of anyone making use of this dynamic madness, but netgraph would be a natural fit, so that you take your netgraph configuration, expand it to dynamically instantiated rc.d services, and then other services, because they have a understood naming, can then pick up, or you can have a dummy rc.d script, which basically only contains out of before and require, so that you can have a script which injects itself as an edge with a constraint without a provide, so that it only reorders the otherwise very flexible order.
Yeah,
So just a constraint.
I think I added it exactly where VirtualBox added their switching layer. So I think that's how I came up with where I put
Netgraph buddy, but the place and base to put it would be immediately at the end of the netif script. That would be before routing and right after netif, and then that would probably be reasonably friendly to other VM and jail managers that deal with switching.
Yeah, the problem that I could foresee is that it kind of belongs in the middle of netif because of the way cloning happens.
Right.
When you create new interfaces, you kind of want them to be visible as created interfaces.
Yeah, I create Netgraph on top of VLANs also. So
Coder couldn't.
I do.
Yes.
I
Okay.
actively do. So
Got it.
I need netif to create the VLAN clones before I run Netgraph on top of that.
Exactly.
It's a tricky spot.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, all the other switch managers have exactly the same problem. So this is definitely not unique. Everybody wants to hook into that spot, and there's nowhere to do it.
Yes and
I'll toss one more in.
John, yeah, what you got?
Just to toss this in, it really gets interesting when you are remote booting all of your hypervisors, which most people don't do.
Remote as in PXE or something else? Define remote.
Yeah, they pixie boot up.
Okay.
So we can take a hypervisor and move it around in a heartbeat, and the hypervisor stays the same. It's just now it's on a different piece of hardware.
Sure.
Yep. Okay, working group. Who would like to be in that working group on these topics? We've had a few, be it documentation, be it
Craytonian for sure.
Craytonian for sure. Okay, well, welcome. I know you were looking for projects.
I'm happy to help, time permitting.
Okay.
Yeah, remote booting is a pain because suddenly your MAC addresses will change and so on. So, for example, IPv6 link local addresses change, or just DHCP leases have to be moved to the new hardware addresses if you use static leases.
So now take that backwards to some of the requirements I've talked about before, which is where I dynamically change MAC addresses on through devices.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course, you
all fit together.
You override the hardware MAC address so that the MAC address moves with the configured instance.
Yeah,
I think there's a specific protocol that exists that that changes MAC addresses, but I'll have to get the name of the protocol and get back to you. But there's a specific protocol where you don't use MAC addresses and you give a computer, like the router, right, gives a computer, what looks like a MAC address, but it's not specific to the hardware address. I think it's specific to like the location or something like that. But I'll if you wanted, there's like protocols that we could use instead of maybe overriding the MAC. But
Daniel, what do you got? He's our author here. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, Netgraph buddy, you can set up an eval for how you want to describe your MAC addresses by interface name. So you can give it a seed, and you can give it tell it which SHA version you want to use, for example, to come up with the MAC address for you. And then that helps your jails, for example, be portable between machines, which I found the best way to handle it, because the built-in way that FreeBSD randomly assigns MACs collides pretty quickly.
Thank you.
I like saying just O2 as a prefix, and then that's a generic one, but it'll be consistent. And then you have whatever it is, 10 digits, 10 hex digits of randomness to give each one, and then I give it a site seed, so that each of my sites will have unique ones, even if the interface names collide. It's very nice.
Preach. Preach.
I've been down this road.
Point of order, this came up with Jan's ZFS data set naming, and he ended up with UUIDs. And I'm finding with all my little scripting, gee, I can conflict on disk labels and, of course, pool names and all the things. So we really need to work on, uniqueness, global uniqueness.
Yeah, it's really hard.
And it keeps burning us. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the issues with your work, Michael, is that you've probably already run into and hopefully solved is the ZFS pool GUID. If you use an image-based approach and don't create a new pool during installation, because you don't do an installation, but you boot your image and then just attach disks to your pool, remove the install medium from your pool if it's mirrored, and resize the VDEV or whatever you're doing there, then you will get a nasty surprise when you try to import the pool from one system on the other, and it says, sorry, can't do it, GUID collision.
Yep. All the things, names, GUIDs, you name it.
Yep. Names, okay, that you can work with.
Well, and then there are the obvious ones and then the subtle ones. And sadly, we have a mix of both broadly in a Unix system. Okay.
And by the way, because I was annoyed with dealing with MAC addresses manually, I wrote a little command I called just ethers, which you give it as a command line the minimum and maximum MAC address in a range, and then it will use an ethers file to track the allocation of already used MAC addresses and pick the next free one, so that you get the next MAC address, then it appends it to the file, fsyncs the file, and so on. So
is that something you can share?
Yeah, I dropped the link.
Great. Let's see. It's lots of chat I've been missing when we changed between shares. Sorry about that.
I should maybe write a README because to this day GitHub can't show man pages in a human readable format. That's better than mdoc raw.
Man dot. Okay. Okay.
So here's the man page if you
scrolling.
want.
Okay, let's take care, Andrew. We've lost you. Let's see. Oh, bhyve CTL. You've got a review. Go into the chat. Ethers, thank you. Andrew, Alexander, does your bhyve CTL review need some discussion, or is it just in where it needs to be?
I don't think that.
Not to change subject, but I'm catching up here.
I don't think it really needs any discussion. It's just like little stuff that makes the syntax of the manual a little bit more like how, the manual style. A little bit of like alignment. I shortened file name to file so that it would fit a little bit better on the screen. And then the main thing about it was in the example that shows how to destroy a VM, I said at the bottom, you can see the VMs in dev VMM.
Okay.
Which I think should be there, and
what a concept.
Maybe really helps if someone is new.
Yeah, no kidding. It's real easy to miss the whole forest from the trees and where we're all sitting. Hate to say it. And I typed a while ago and it's still happy. Oh, cool. And thank you, Jan, for that link to ethers. I've put it in the doc. I'm waiting for the doc to become responsive again. Okay.
But any all discussion is welcome. Everyone who's in this call is, of course, welcome to approve it or accept changes or any of that, or request changes. Any of that kind of commentary on there is helpful.
So I think we've produced 2 years worth of to-do list items for our new year upon us. Happy 2027. Let's see. We have this awesome. Okay. Keep it coming. Let's use the calls to kind of structure this and organize this, but it sounds like we might have to have some dedicated, be it calls or separate calls to just address some of this. So our to-do list item does not exceed our results list. Yes, Jan.
bhyve without uppercase D will just leave the stale VMM device around when bhyve exits, which can also trip up new users who don't know to run bhyve control to destroy the VMM device. And yeah, it will tie up all the resources because the VMM device's virtual memory stays around.
And your memory, exactly. So that smells deeply developer-y, and I would hope the
No,
default has changed.
No, the
it
default has not changed.
it won't
Okay.
change because sometimes when you want the VM device to just stay around for debugging purposes, so that you kind
Yeah,
of have
debug
the
and
halted
development.
machine to
Yeah,
inspect.
yeah.
And yeah,
And I think that that's a really good thing. One thing that I conflict with some of the other people who are interested in Doc is, I like FreeBSD because FreeBSD is a developer first kind of system, and so it leads to the overall thing being much simpler and easier to understand, even though the way it's presented is less convoluted, or is more convoluted, because they've done that and then they don't have layers of abstraction making the whole thing super duper convoluted. So I have no problem with it being that way, but in my I don't know if it is or not, but in my rewrite of bhyve man page, I want every single example to be specified with D, and then that's just a really easy way that it doesn't need some extra warning, but
Yep.
they know there were no examples presented to them that didn't have D, so they know that that's an advanced use case to use it without that, and then that doesn't require the doc to become filled with warnings that nobody likes.
Yeah.
or
Same
just
defaults are
use
always a good thing.
bhyve
Go ahead.
config instead of the terse, ugly single letter options. Just use the long form and specify them one option at a time as a bhyve config, because that's hopefully what users are going to adopt instead of just collecting line noise.
From
Well,
talking to
they both
people
can get very noisy. Go ahead.
from talking to people in the um community Discord, people who are just users and not developers, I don't think that anyone is using the bhyve config file. That was one of the things I wanted to put in the description when I was saying I wanted to rewrite that first bit in the description but wasn't exactly sure how to do it yet, that I want to explain in the description the general usage, that you're going to use bhyve to create your configuration, and then you're going to use -k and save that to a configuration file, and you're not just going to run the script every time. You're going to cook it up the first time
Yeah.
and then use that, because nobody is using that. Everybody shares with me these bhyve scripts. Nobody's ever shared with me a bhyve config
Yep.
script. I don't think anybody is using it, and I think that
Um,
that's from Doc.
Well, and it was late to the game, so here we are. Go
I'm
ahead.
using it in my machines, and I haven't used it in a few years than the old-fashioned way.
Oh, which brings up questions like VM bhyve, which has its own rather simple configuration format, but it's not the new one, and I'm torn on what the most user-friendly approach is. Anyway, so we have covered a lot of ground and defined a lot of things to work on. bhyve config 5. Thank you for posting that manual page. Other questions, ideas, concerns that have cropped up while going down all these different awesome rat holes?
If anybody is interested in working with me on this man pages, I especially want everyone, because it's so hard to get you can't get consensus after the fact, and it takes me really long to iterate through these things and figure out what they do. But probably the best way is to just reach out to me on Discord.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
That doesn't need its own meeting. Anybody can
Yeah.
just say anything at any time, and then that's really helpful, and I appreciate it.
Are there preferred hours to catch you during? Because as Mark's saying, hey, I just woke up, and some of us are West Coast, some of us are in Europe, some of us are far, far away. What works for you?
If you don't mind it being asynchronous, you can reach out whenever is most convenient for you and whenever you have the idea, because I check it every day, and
Okay.
I'm in Eastern time zone, Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah.
It's 2:30 p.m. here. But any time is fine.
Okay, what channel, what username?
So I'm in the FreeBSD Discord server, and my username is Concussious.
Let me know if I spell this right. CUNCUOUS. I know I probably have. Go ahead and put it in chat. I will get it wrong. FreeBSD Discord user CONCUSSIOUS. Okay, thank you. Fabricator reviews. Well, he's just posted the one for bhyve CTL right there. Jan, does that answer your question?
And John, I think we're friends on Discord, actually. You're Crest?
He's Crest.
Yeah, we're friends on Discord.
Aww. Okay. Anything else? We have all our work to do, and let's take it to asynchronous on a few of these topics and one-on-one. There's lots to do. Thank you, everyone who jumped in, especially Daniel, who came in to give us the wisdom we're after based on John's early question an hour ago.
I'm happy to
Yes.
review your stuff, and because I have followed bhyve's development, and so I may know the context. But I'm not ignoring you. If you sent me something via Discord, I'm just not that active on Discord. So yeah.
Cool.
No problem. Thank you. I didn't send. I have nothing pending. But I'll post in that also my user on Fabricator, if you like that. So on Fabricator there's a bhyve group, and I would urge everyone in this call to join that group. And then I think it's set up as an umbrella, which is my favorite kind of groups there, because if you are in whatever umbrella, then you get an email anytime someone posts a review in that umbrella. And that is just so nice. So we have an umbrella for man pages. Please use that if you're doing any man pages.
Yeah, but some of us think that the notion of more email is like not always helpful. But yeah, you're right. You're totally right.
Hey, Zai. For Alex.
Hey, I'm done.
For Alex.
Sorry.
My other question is like, all right, so have you tried doing GPU pass-through with Windows using VM-bhyve, the thing, or like the VMM command, the virtual machine? I think it's called like virtual machine monitor or something like that. But
no, I haven't tried that because I'm very interested in developing base, and I learned, throughout the decades that if I use the abstraction layer, then the abstraction layer.
The abstraction layer to me,
so like, I need
one at a time. One at a time. We can't follow you.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, question.
I'm not using this. I'm not using this because I need bhyve like for work. Or business. I'm using this to develop FreeBSD and the open source community and this kind of thing. So, however long it takes me to figure it out is no problem, because I'm just interested in writing the doc, and I'm not really interested in those kind of projects.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is kind of like to cheat a little bit, because like if I use VMM or bhyve or VM bhyve, it's like although it's an abstraction, I have not looked into it, but I believe all they are scripts, right? So if I wanted to understand how a GPU pass-through works on a Windows device, I would first do it on VM or VM-bhyve, and if it works, what I would do is then I would go to the code and I would look at the SSH file, and because all they're doing is they are abstracting over the already existing bhyve CTL command or bhyve command, right? So it's just like I can figure out how to do it because it works automatically here, because what I'm doing is I'm looking at a company and I'm just taking their best practices, right? I don't know if this will help, right? But it's just like a suggestion where it's like, I don't know.
No, that actually sounds very helpful. It seems that, now that you're mentioning that, it seems that my I've done the classic developer move of just getting laser focused and missing the forest for the trees.
Well, there's that, but I really don't want to see buckets more of true NAS and VMM bug reports where bhyve is broken. It's like, no, bhyve is working perfectly. It's that abstraction layer that has, be it a typo, be it whatever, and hearing, oh, I can't boot this hard drive. Well, it's trying to treat the hard drive like an ISO image. It's like, those are not bhyve's fault. So I very much love your approach, Alexander, to just work low level and fan out rather than vice versa. So I will say the greatest thing I ever did for VMRC was to simply generate a bhyve boot configuration script and then execute it so that you get to see what it's doing rather than hiding the behavior. Because there's hopefully a healthy middle ground for everyone involved. For example, does VMBhyve have a config dump that where it does absolutely nothing but do a dry run and give a config file? I, for example, couldn't find an import, and I would like to do an export from all of my tools to VMBhyve and say, okay, just here's this extra little command. It splats out a VMBhyve config so you can spin it up in your tool of choice, et cetera, et cetera.
So for what I use VMBhyve for is there's like the configuration file, right? So when I create a VM, I have to, I'm basically doing is I'm just saying, instead of me saying VM hyphen, like T, hyphen M, hyphen S, hyphen Z and stuff like that, I can just do VM create hyphen size of my drive and then hyphen, hey, this is where the configuration file lives, right?
Yep.
And then what it is doing, it is then doing a bhyve CTL command or a bhyve create command. I don't know, but it's like a SSH. And I thought about doing this myself, where it's like I'm basically creating an abstraction over like how people do jails, like Basquiat jails. Like they're just all at the end of the day SSH scripts over, it's like they're.
Cool.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's all true. What I hope is out there is VMBhyve developer documentation, a correct auto-generated bridge, and per John's point, a choice of Netgraph with very little interaction. I believe it does have some support for fancier networking bridging, but I want the shortest paths from users to developers and developers to users rather than two separate, never shall they meet communities.
Yes, that's my problem with abstraction layers. I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm not saying that they're cheating. I'm just saying what I'm interested in is the community and developing the documentation. And in my experience, using abstraction layers just makes that worse and silos the whole thing out.
On that beautiful point, who would like the honors? Some of you know what I mean.
Please like and subscribe for more videos.
Boom. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Let's take it to all the various offline asynchronous channels and one-on-one calls. And this has been a fantastic call. I will cap it right here while we're on a high spot, and I'll see you next week.